was a big win. HB 1110 broadly expanded where middle housing is allowed for across Washington state. The bill was watered down a little bit as it went through the process, but I think ended in a pretty transformative manner where it's going to allow fourplexes everywhere within the large cities and sixplexes near major transit, or if two of the homes are affordable, lower tiers for smaller cities, but still setting a minimum baseline of duplexes everywhere for small cities and those which are contiguous to urban growth areas. Taking a step back, I think it's important to recognize how the history of zoning is deeply entangled with race in America. The notion of single family zoning itself really came about, was pioneered by racists who were looking to pivot from a Supreme Court decision in which they ruled that it was unconstitutional to explicitly zone by race. And so they instead opted to zone by class, to require a minimum lot square footage, to set aside some areas as single family zoned land, driving up the cost of the housing that could be purchased within exclusive neighborhoods. And I really view middle housing as being a giant step forwards to remedy those harms that were done a century ago and start to unravel the exclusivity that pervades so much of our built environment and land use regulations. Dan Bertolet put together some great information about how where middle housing exists, it's disproportionately useful as a path toward Black homeownership, with about 70% greater share of Black homeowners living in middle housing as compared to non-Black homeowners. And I think just to give a little pin in it too, I think I view this as a supply side piece that really complements the demand side piece of the Covenant homeownership account in terms of creating smaller scale and more affordable homeownership opportunities, both through the great organizations like Habitat, Homestead, developing intentional affordable homeownership options, as well as just the market more broadly. Any questions here? Oh, and I'll just note that this is going to be enacted through the comprehensive plan updates that cities are embarking on. And so it's setting a baseline floor of residential density through that process. Any questions, comments? I know a lot of people on here were pretty involved in middle housing, so we'll give the opportunity to chime in if you want. Dorsal.
Yes, I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit to some of the thinking around 1337 and how it'll interact with 1110.
Sure. Bambi told me to just stay focused on the BHI priorities, but I will note that as it passed 1110 allows ADUs to be counted as one of those middle housing options. And so it's, I think in some of the smaller cities, the ADU bill 1337 will end up having as big or bigger impact than 1110.
All right, well, yeah, go ahead, Jesse.
I just want to close by saying that this was the result of a lot of sustained advocacy, and going into this session, a lot of people doubted that we could get this across the finish line, and that we would have to pivot into lot splitting bills or just do the ADU bill. And so it's really impressive to see it get across the finish line and see Washington join the ranks of a growing number of states doing big land use reforms.
True, Jesse, that's very well said. It truly took sustained advocacy and coalition building. I would love to hear from folks like Ryan, who are also on the front lines in trying to get this across the finish line, and how you see implementation moving forward as it relates to the BHI priorities. Mr. King, I see you're here as well. If you want to say a few words about the importance of having seen this bill pass. So Ryan, Donald, if you want to chime in here.
Gonna let Donald chime in first if he wants to.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you, Ryan. The passage of this bill, I think, is much bigger than most of us have comprehended. This is of national importance. It's one step in the restorative actions of what I see as a criminal act of racial covenants that were a norm in Washington state and upheld by the state Supreme Court. This is going to be a great benefit to what our goals are and what we're planning to do with the Nehemiah Initiative and our partner churches in developing our first 5 sites as affordable home ownership opportunities. This is a great increase in home ownership funding and subsidies like we've never had before. So again, it's going to be a huge benefit to those of us that are seeking to increase opportunities for Black home ownership, for closing the racial wealth gap, and also this restorative justice that this act represents. The now home ownership covenant account is now the Home Ownership Covenant Act. So congratulations to all who've had a hand in getting this across the finish line.
Thank you, Donald. Brian?
I mean, very little that I have to add that hasn't already been said. I would just note that for those of you who have been involved in this, you know, this wasn't the first year this had been proposed. This wasn't even the second year this has been proposed. This bill has essentially been proposed, or a version of this had been attempted for years, even before I showed up on the scene, and for years probably before that as well. This really was the work of a long period, as Patience said earlier, of sustained advocacy, pushing for this effort and really trying to push this across the finish line. And the only reason it got there was because it wasn't because of, you know, one time this or one time that. It was because of that sustained advocacy over years of work. So congratulations to all of us in helping make that a reality. From the Habitat perspective, I would note that one of the things we're really super excited about is being able to build more and add more to the areas that we're going to be working on, and be able to provide more home ownership opportunities for more families in more places that we wouldn't have been able to before. So this is really an exciting opportunity for all of us. Obviously, us at Habitat are really excited about it, but you know, it's also going to be great for our for-profit partners as well as our other nonprofit partners. So really looking forward to seeing what ends up coming out of it, and really glad that Donald particularly noted the implications around the covenants and the historical use of single-family zoning to not even implicitly, explicitly block people of color from being able to buy homes. So this is hopefully going to be able to make a big or at least a big start down the road in making that, in fixing that. So thank you.
Oh, and Patience, I apologize. I was jumping to the CHA comment because I know I need to
still
leave.
very relevant though to this.
I need to leave early, but middle housing goes hand in hand with the CHA as well.
Absolutely. I will not to get this question on how cities will be tracking performance on this bill and having metrics. The Department of Commerce is tasked with the responsibility, number one, to develop model ordinances for jurisdictions and provide guidance on process. And I do believe that metrics will be a part of that work that they will be taking on. But we also know that each city right now is planning under the Growth Management Act. They are looking at comprehensive plan updates, and there's a lot of data metrics to be developed within that work as well. With that said, I will pivot us over to the next big win, and Bambi, if you want to guide us on providing an overview on this one.
You bet. So another big win for us was the surplus and underutilized land bill. Now, this was like gold star bill in that it was unanimous. It basically got unanimous yes as it went through its committees. It got a unanimous yes when it went to the Senate, when it went to the House. And this bill is making sure that permanently affordable homeownership is now defined as a public benefit, along with rental housing and other types of affordable homes. And so, we all understand that it's a big continuum. When you're talking about trying to move the needle around affordable housing, you have anything from home ownership all the way over to, needing fully supported housing. And this is a really great win. Kathleen Hosfeld and others from Homestead Community Land Trust were very instrumental in organizing around this win. And now that we are seen as a public benefit, affordable homeownership, it means that those projects can receive the surplus public property that is designated for public benefit. And we all understand that when it comes to purchasing a home, when you are taking out any portion of the value of the land and not having to be that part of your mortgage, a part of your expense, you are able to create a more affordable possibility for someone to own a home. So this is huge. It seems like a small little fix. It seems kind of like a technical thing, but if you think about it conceptually, it is actually a very big thing to say, you know what, actually permanently affordable home ownership should be an option. We need to figure out how to make it an option. And now it is defined formally as a public benefit. So this means surplus and underutilized lands, here we come. So I don't know if there's anyone else in the audience here today who would like to chime in about it. I know that Kathleen was unable to meet with us here today because she had a conflict for herself. But if there's anyone else who's been instrumental in this work or wants to reflect on this work, please feel free to go ahead and do so. And giving it the full 20-second silence, I'm going to move on to our next win.
Yeah, well, I must say that this is another one where the example of sustained advocacy is essential. This was not the first time that this bill was introduced. It was tried the year prior and the year prior, and now we've gotten to a place where it's become law, and it's a great place to be in. And many thanks to Kathleen and the Community Land Trust partners who have been hard at work in getting this across the finish line. On to the next big win, Bambi.
All right. So our next big win, another win in our bucket, which I hope you've noticed the colors actually have meaning, and we got a win in every bucket. We got a win in every one of our categories. So this is State Housing Trust Fund practices. Again, another not super sexy bill. People are like, this is a fix it up bill. This is a codify things that are better practices. It was brought forward by the Department of Commerce, but really important changes happening here. So now an actual by itself standalone new application just for home ownership as we start thinking about the State Housing Trust Fund. And then you also have, we were talking about earlier, reporting. So now we have reporting of the number of homeownership projects that are funded, how much of the funding was given, and also getting a sense of, what are the area median incomes of the households that have been served. When we have information like this, we can make better choices in the future. We can understand what's missing. So being able to have that data is going to be really an important and powerful tool. Also, we all know that anytime that you have regulation or practices that add time to a project, you are adding cost. So the application period has been shortened for faster turnaround. It went from 90 days to 60 days. And that may seem small, but in the life of somebody trying to create all of the funding and all of the different bricks to come together for a project to lift off, it's a big deal to be able to cut a month. And then pre-construction technical assistance. So this is something that is funded by the trust fund. And this is going to be providing an emphasis that we are prioritizing BIPOC-led community organizations, and also organizations who are serving BIPOC communities, but who have not received funding before. So the idea is to, again, look at what we do in our practices through an equity lens. Where is it that people are not being heard? Who isn't getting in the door in terms of looking at the needs they have for that pre-construction technical assistance? So these changes mean better practices, less costs, and eventually that is going to mean more affordable homes. And if there's anyone, I know Anne was not able to be here today, but if there's anyone from Commerce or anyone else who, is a part of this effort, please do feel free, speak up.
Ryan?
One quick thing I did want to note with this, another huge win that was a part of this was the changing, or was the eliminating of organizational limits, award limits for housing. For those of you who haven't necessarily used the Housing Trust Fund part before, home ownership had and under the current rules actually only has limits of 30% of what rental organizations are able to access. So rental organizations are able to tap into $10 million per organization per biennium. But currently, before this law was passed, currently home ownership organizations can only tap into 3 million per biennium. That really puts a damper on any kind of projects. It also puts a massive damper on being able to scale. Luckily enough, with the elimination of that rule and making it so they're not able to put those kind of limits on there anymore, hopefully that means we're going to see more scale and see more production and actually see more, especially in the home ownership space in particular. So just wanted to kind of highlight that.
Another critical long-standing issue, Ryan. Marty, I wonder if you want to come in here and just reflect on some of these long-standing issues that have been advocated on for so long, and to see them across the finish line, such a critical milestone.
Well, thank you, Patience. I mean, I guess the only thing I would add, and it's already been said, is that the sausage making process can be extremely frustrating when things happen so slowly, and a lot of these issues have been taken up for a long time. And I guess I can't help but wonder if a number of factors aren't coming into alignment in terms of the stars these days. Not the least of which is the fact that we don't have to try to sell people on the notion that there's a housing crisis anymore, but that the efforts around this initiative, BHI, and all of your ability to come together have put on top of disparity studies and a new sense of wokeness, if you will, with some folk, into a new agenda of urgency. And to build on Patience's point, we have to consider this the beginning and keep the pressure up.
Well said, buddy. Thank you. Any other comments on this particular bill being passed? With that, we'll pivot over to the funding. I think we saw some significant wins in the state budget. I don't know, Bambi and Jesse, if you want to add some color here on the specifics around the amounts. And then after that, we'll pivot over to looking at the future, and then we'll dive into CHA. I think folks are waiting that moment.
Yeah, I won't hold up CHA too long. I think it was a really impressive budget this year for affordable housing. despite some of our own failures to pass the Affordable Homes Act. We really saw a historic level of investment in the Housing Trust Fund, $400 million, highest amount allocated, with the caveats of the times with federal stimulus dollars excluded, really showing that lawmakers are prioritizing affordable housing and affordable homeownership. This is noting 40 million of that Housing Trust Fund allocation is dedicated to a competitive affordable homeownership grants. And I'll also call out $14 million that was earmarked for the Tacoma Habitat for Humanity to purchase basically to transition properties that are with expiring housing authority properties for permanently affordable homeownership options. And so it's $54 million through the Housing Trust Fund for affordable homeownership, in addition to some great funds through the Connecting Housing to Infrastructure Program, or CHIP. There was $60 million dedicated to that, and then 40 million for the land acquisition program. And both of these can be used for homeownership as well as rental. And I'll turn it back to you all.
Thank you, Jesse, and thank you all for the excellent work advocating for this funding. I think we always say that the challenge in increasing Black homeownership is inherently also a supply and demand challenge. And without the significant funding to get there, we will be slow in making an impact. And with that said, we want to reflect just briefly on some state bills that we feel were missed opportunities, but will inform next steps for us. Because having had a win this year, we're beginning to think about what will a bill in 2024 look like, and where we will be zeroing in planning proactively in terms of strategy. And there's so much to learn from the win that we had with the CHA. We know that the lot splitting bill did not move forward. We had anticipated that this will be the easier one. And I think it took one meeting where one of the legislators called it a lot Magadan, and that halted the bill from just proceeding forward. It would have allowed most lot splitting across communities to allow existing properties to have even more capacity to house more people with homeownership opportunities. And with that stopped, there's an opportunity to come back next year. And I know this is work that has a strong coalition of support across the board. So happy to be working with folks at Sightline, AARP, and others who are going to be likely circling back to support next steps around this. Jesse, do you want to put color on the TOD bill and the opportunity that's presented there, and how we'll be circling back to some of the work around that?
Yeah, and I'll just close a little bit on the lot splitting. It was originally proposed as kind of this more modest alternative to middle housing. We got pretty excited about the opportunities to combine middle housing with lot splitting and really get to substantial advances in middle housing throughout Washington. I think some lawmakers and cities saw that combination and freaked out once they saw middle housing was moving forward. So it was kind of a victim of middle housing's success. But I think the idea is going to come back in the future, because it is a very direct answer to the issue of people who are house rich and cash poor. On TOD, this bill was moving through without particularly much attention through the Senate. And I think that backfired once it hit the House, and once people started to really learn about how substantial the zoning changes it would be. It would mandate R in terms of allowing mid-rise density across a big swath of land that's around frequent transit. So once they started doing the mapping, and if they learning what floor area ratio of 4 or 6 means, there was a lot of city backlash, and it got pretty mired in the bill got mired in debates over what the affordability regulations and requirements should be, with House lawmakers demanding that there be some kind of mandatory inclusionary, and like market rate developers not willing to negotiate on that point. And time kind of ran out to figure out any sort of incentive zoning structure that would be meaningful and work for people. I think a big focus of our work over the next year on this front is going to be through the local comprehensive plan updates in Seattle and Bellevue and in other cities to the extent that we have capacity. We're forming up a coalition in Seattle, tentatively called the Complete Communities Coalition, hosting a workshop next Wednesday as part of Affordable Housing Week. You can find it on the website. Love to see as many people who are interested from this meeting attend that as possible. I think the bill, the timing for next year is a little awkward with the comprehensive plan updates. The cities were already pushing back about the notion of passing a bill in April of this year, and then them needing to redo some of their early comprehensive planning efforts and prepare for next year. And if you don't do it through the major update cycle, it drives up the cost pretty significantly because they need to do a separate environmental impact statement analysis. Anyway, that's just to say that we anticipate that the notion is going to come back as a bill. We're focused most heavily for this year on the local implementations through comprehensive planning, but anticipate we'll support an effort on TOD next year, but think it might really be the year after that sees it go further. Yeah, any questions there?
No questions, but a big opportunity for next legislative session, Jesse. And we had other bills that did not proceed. The anti-displacement property tax exemption was another one. We expect that the assessor here locally will be proceeding with efforts around this. And the BHI policy network is likely a good partner to be thinking with around what an actual proposal could look like in 2024. The housing benefit districts was another bill, big vision and a lot of great work that went into advancing this bill. And we once again had a missed opportunity from getting this bill across the finish line. And I know this is work that many of you have been at for the longest time. Peter Osa, I see you on the call. Marty, you're on the call, Faith and others who've envisioned this work. And we're at a point where we will be pivoting on the strategy of how we get this bill refreshed, think about some rebranding during interim session, get some legislators to step up to champion it and get it across the finish line. And tap some of our housing agencies, the Washington State Housing Finance Commission, as a possible partner of how do we do land acquisition at scale, and how do we get ahead of opportunities in meaningful timelines so we're able to truly capture the opportunity. So we'll be bringing back updates as those conversations evolve. We're yet to convene as a sound communities to debrief this experience that we had this session and map some critical next steps. I do want us to preserve a significant amount of time for the CHA, so that's why I'm trying to speed us ahead to that point. The other funding bills that did not make it across the finish line were the wealth tax proposal, which is a significant amount of revenue. And this is one that will be rolling up our sleeves to show support from the BHI network really significantly throughout this time until next year, and trying to map what the right timeline will be to get this tax moving forward. And I think I've heard someone say, let's not call it that. Let's not even call it wealth tax. So maybe Jesse or someone was fussy about this proposal. The Affordable Homes Act is another one that we were moving forward. That's the real estate exercise tax, which was going to generate a significant amount of revenue, $200 million annually at the state level, and provide 0.25% local option for jurisdictions locally. And in the last hour, we did not get the full support to get this one across the finish line. And we had committed some of the funding to supporting homeownership production. So not seeing it across the finish line is a big missed opportunity, but strategies are underway now in debriefing and planning what a path could be. 2024 being an election year, it's hard to envision a place where this will be a tax that will move forward, but there's a lot of appetite from legislators to map a path possibly for that next year, and we'll keep this group apprised of what that work looks like. The Washington Future Fund is work that early on, right off the gates, did not get as much support, and that's a proposal that we want to circle back and give strong support for. Jesse and others on the call, final comments just on there's wins, reflections, questions, comments, appreciations. This is the open floor. Jesse, last word?
Yeah, I think overall, there was a point in the legislative session where I was feeling pretty down about about the different failures. Like, we went into it with an extremely ambitious agenda, and I'd say we got about 40% of it. And that 40% is still probably the most that the legislature has ever done for housing, at least within a single section. And so I feel pretty good about where we've ended this legislative session, and look forward to future ones.
And I'll just add in there, you know, I know that's a lot of information, even just going through 4 bills, so much, you know, jargon and things to think about. And, you know, hopefully as we are seeing the digest, being able to kind of digest these in a different way and different language, and being able to have some time with them. It's hard to keep 14 bills in your head and what has happened, but it is important to remember that, you know, this is a framework that came together from community. The question was, what were the bills that were going to most effectively increase Black homeownership? And so every time that we're looking at every one of these bills, that is the lens we are coming from. And I know sometimes it can feel like, you know, we fluctuate between that lens and a bigger affordable housing lens. But, you know, what we're here to do together for Black Home Initiative is to make sure that that's centered. And so every one of these bills are making that significant change. And so just bringing that back up again, because it's so much information. I mean, even if we just sat here and talked about 4 bills, I feel like we talked about 20. So just saying that, I'm a newbie at the policy stuff. I can tell you, I start to glaze over after a hot minute, and I just want to put that out there, that if you're feeling that, you are not alone. But the general idea would be like, we did some stuff, you know, we came in and we had 4 laws out of like the 12 things we chose. And of those others that didn't pass, you know, if we were playing at a race and this was our card and we had our, you know, if we were going for a race car, we were going to pick this one, you know, we have a lot of good vehicles coming forward. So just reiterating that.
Well said, Bambi. I will say, I agree, 11 bills is a lot to keep track of, but you've made it easy. I want to acknowledge the great work you've done, Bambi, in convening the network and really keeping things organized, and just how great you've all worked together as the policy team. So Jesse, Chad, and others, and the policy network for rolling up your sleeves. It's truly been impressive to watch you all get these wins across the finish line. Now, having said that, if there are no hot comments, we will pivot over to the issue of the hour, which is the Covenant homeownership account. And I am excited for us to just dive right into talking about that in real time, reflecting on the journey that we're all in and the success that is in passing that bill. 20-minute pause here for any comments. Peter, you're awfully quiet. I would love to hear your thoughts on what we do on the HBD.
I'm practicing being quiet because I'm not very good at it.
That's a surprise.
Yeah, I think there's conversations to be had, and maybe new partners to be found. We were in a discussion the other day that maybe even Sound Transit should be a more aggressive partner in how they acquire and what they acquire, and maybe they have more opportunity to be engaged in thinking about future housing sites as they acquire. But of course, the Housing Finance Commission and how we use the LAP program, 40 million is a great piece and there's structure there, but how do we turn that into 250 million? And it really comes down to acquiring land. And so if it's in an HBD or not, we are all of the mind that the objective is still about getting land under control and in the pipeline and dedicated to all ranges of affordability. So I think the notion has been advanced and there's work to be done. And but it, just like many of the bills you talked about, may take a different shape or form and acquire a new acronym.
That's right. Absolutely, Peter. Well, there's so much more work to be done, and we will be debriefing on the HBDs separately with the Sound Communities partners and coming back to this group with some informative steps on getting ready for a bill in 2024. Any other comments? And Nicholas, thanks for offering to join the brainstorming. All right, for the issue of the hour, pivoting over to talk about the Covenant homeownership account. And when I talk about this one, I'm really thrilled and excited to know that the work that we put in ahead of legislative session truly paid off. And I think that is a model that we are building on as we move forward. It is a strategy that we've seen to be effective. There are close to very few bills that go through legislative session through one cycle. Each time you have to do an education bill and get to a point where the bill gains some salience, and then it is yet to pass. And this one was a one-time and done bill. But truly what fundamentally made this possible was the robust process of engaging stakeholders upfront, of engaging legislators upfront, and having our champions clear on what the goal and vision were. It was also tapping the communities who care about this work from different parts of sectors to show up and speak in support of the bill. And we don't get that work to be made possible without all of us just really rolling up our sleeves to get this work done. So I do want to reflect on the steps that we took to get there, which is it was early sometime September last year, or even prior, where we had 50 members of a work group coming together to explore the concept of having a bill that would address the impacts of racially restrictive covenants. We had over 5 meetings, and we were wanting to understand what are the critical barriers we really wanted to zero in on. and how could a policy overcome those? And how can we think of solutions that will not lead us to a place where if there was a lawsuit, which we expect there will be, we would be able to stand the test of any litigation or any liability in terms of the language we used in engaging, the language we used in the draft bill. And it truly took partners, and I do want to name folks in this call and want everyone to get an opportunity to reflect on what this bill means for you. So stand by and be ready for your remarks. We did have, as we got into legislative session timeline at the end of interim session, a covenant home ownership strategy team that was spending time weekly thinking about what the bill language was. So folks at Pacifica Law Group, working with the Washington State Housing Finance Commission, helping us all think about what the right legal language was. And I do have to emphasize that this is another example of the long-standing work that had been underway. The Finance Commission had also been thinking of how in the world can we get ourselves as a government agency to be in a place where we can implement a special purpose credit program. And this was with conversations that were happening with other housing agencies in other states to think about where the biggest opportunity was. So it was truly the alignment of stars, as you were saying, Marty, earlier, just as we're all getting to this point of the importance of effectively seeing racial equity operationalized in our systems, but also the preparedness that we all had in that moment. Representative Frank Chop was a critical champion and partner, Representative Jamila Taylor, very early on, coming together with stakeholders in that strategy group, as well as Senator Lovick, who's truly been a champion in helping get this work across the finish line. And to really get ready for mobilization, we initially had another group that would meet to get updates of where the work was headed around the bill and how can we be getting as much extensive feedback and support as we could. I do want to note some numbers that Bambi probably walks through a lot better than I can because she was reaching out to those folks. More than 2,000 people signed in pro. That's a significant number of people to be organizing and reaching to support a bill. We had over 40 testifiers, many of whom are in this room. So we see you, Cliff, and all your organizing of homeowners who are showing up to testify, sharing their stories. I know Denise is on this call. I know Mr. King is on this call. I don't know if he's still here, but a lot of time went into testifying. I did see that Marty is on the call. Marty was causing a lot of trouble with emails and getting folks riled up to show up and testify. And Marty, thank you for all of your work in getting the word out and really helping get across the finish line. I know Nicole is on the call. Nicole was one of the folks who was testifying as a realtor. And I think that's just amazing to have that voice of support, and having that alongside the realtors who essentially took a position of support, which fundamentally came at the heels of the leadership that Representative Taylor did in getting the realtors to commit. And I know Cliff, you had a hand in helping get that conversation off the ground. We did have Sean Scott. I know Sean was on the call earlier, so I hope you get time here to share some of your perspectives and takeaways on some of the work. Anna Byrne at Zillow testifying and showing strong support. Man, I'm sure I will miss so many of you who testified. Bambi, you will come in and fill gaps. There's so many folks here who were there. The WNBA folks were helping us get more folks who are showing up to testify from the mortgage lenders. Truly impressive. Michael Dodson, who's on the call. So let's get there and talk a little bit about reflections. But more than 3 hours of testimony went in. Some of the next steps, of course, that I have to note is on Monday, this bill gets signed into law. I believe many of you have been invited. Governor Inslee will be there signing the bill. Representative Taylor has done some extensive legwork organizing people to be there. And I understand there's hundreds of us as a community who are going to be gathered there. So if you're interested in joining, please shoot us an email, let us know. We're specifically wanting to have more of the BHI network partnership being represented. Now, I must underscore that there were parts of solutions that were identified by the work group early on that were not included in this bill. The bill ends up focusing on some aspect, but not fully what was defined by some of the strategy group. And we'll get to a slide that walks through what some of those are and what's included in the bill. That's an area of opportunity where we're thinking of what the next bill will look like as we plan for 2024 legislative session. We're also thinking at this particular moment in time, and special thanks to the Seattle Foundation for the support in getting this group off the ground with funding support for the coordination role. We're now planning to really truly reach community voices being integrated into this process. It's an opportunity that we've all identified as huge. We need people who are most impacted being on the front lines and showing up to talk about BHI from a personal perspective and from their lived experience. And that is work that we will be getting off the ground in the next couple of months. Next slide, please. So what we did achieve in the bill, I don't want to provide the overview on my own here, so I'll take a stab, and Bambi, you will chime in because I know you would like to share some of your perspective. But this is a $100 document recording assessment that was included for each real estate transaction. There were some exemptions for some documents that are non-real estate related. And what it does is it takes this funding and puts it into an account, and the account will be creating this special purpose credit program, which we continue to underscore. This is groundbreaking in that it is the first special purpose credit program run by a government agency. For those of you who are in the financial lending space, you know that since 1976, financial lenders have been able to run special purpose credit programs, but government agencies have not been players in that space. And through analysis of federal regulation B, we are able to have this become law here in Washington state as the first in the nation. And we already have outreach from different stakeholders wanting to learn from all of us how we pulled all of this together and what the implementation will look like and how can they learn from Washington state. And in terms of what the funds you will be dedicated to, down payment and closing cost assistance for first-time home buyers will be the priority, and the AMI levels go up to 100% AMI. Bambi, do you want to add color here on the criteria that's defined in terms of being able to qualify and what timeline you should have been in Washington state to be able to qualify? And then we can talk about what we saw as left out in the bill.
You bet. So in terms of having that work group together, and as we move through trying to figure out what is this bill going to be, and a real big conversation that we kept coming back to was around the eligibility. It took up a lot of space and time, and it needed to, because we want this to be something that is effective. And at the same time, we knew that we were going to get legal challenges, and we needed to make sure that we had kind of all of our ducks in a row. So in the end, what we are thinking that could work, and what, was politically viable, and what people said, yes, this could be, and maybe this couldn't be. In the end, what we landed up with is organizing around the passage of the Fair Housing Law. So if you were a Washington resident before April 1968, there was no federal fair housing law to protect you from housing discrimination. And the idea was that if you were a resident before then you would have been excluded from homeownership by racially restrictive covenants. And so therein lies the kind of initial discrimination. What's going to happen with the bill is it's going to initiate a study, and the study is going to be, looked at through the Washington Homeownership. Oh, it's not the Resource Center, other one, the commission, sorry. So, sorry, Steve. The commission is going to be instituting a study that's going to say, who are those people? Who was excluded from homeownership by restrictive covenants? Who were part of those marginalized populations before 1968? So with that in mind, if you are that person, or if you are a descendant of that person, then you would become eligible for the program. You would need to be a first-time home buyer, and you also would need to have your income, your median income, at or below 100% of the average median income. And, we would have loved to have that be even more expansive, but, getting to 100% was great, because a lot of programs, they stop at 80%, and we all know how much houses cost, and we know that we need to try and make to be as inclusive as possible. So in terms of thinking about who this is going to directly affect, it's going to be those people excluded from homeownership by the restrictive covenants who were here as Washington residents before April 1968, and those who are descendants of them, first-time homebuyer, income at or below 100%.
Well, thank you, Bambi. And I will add that we will have an oversight committee that will be housed at the Department of Financial Institutions, DFI. So implementation of that may likely mean that some of you may be tapped to serve in that oversight committee. I do know that our partners at the Housing Finance Commission are getting ready to proactively get the RFP out, and the panel is being pulled together. So that work will certainly be on time or ahead of schedule. And we're excited to see that implementation getting out of the door proactively. So having said that, I do want to invite the great community that made this possible, which is all of you, to reflect and talk more about what it means for you to see the passage of this bill. And Marty, you have a question on, will the study or oversight committee address the questions of attestation related to qualification? The study will address that question proactively. The oversight committee will be more of representation of community members to provide transparency and accountability on just the implementation of the program. But the study will do the extensive work. And thank you for that question. With that said, I don't know, Mr. King, if you want to lead the way here and kick us off. And I will ask that Steve, if you're still on the call, if you can talk a little bit after Donald about the implementation. I know you have to leave, Mr. King, so over to you.
Well, thank you, Patience, for that additional time, and apologize for covering this earlier, but I wanted to get that message out before I had to leave, which I'm about 5 minutes past my next meeting right now. One of the things I wanted to add to this is when we look at the lessons learned on how this bill came about and how there was clear evidence in racially restrictive covenant language that were decades of barriers to Black home ownership. I think this was an important feature in being able to make this successful and make the argument for it successful. And I think within the challenges that we may face, the legal challenges, I think that needs to be raised. It should almost be a welcome conversation in court to talk about how there is evidence of clear barriers that were set that were contrary to the 14th Amendment in the US Constitution. That to be able to defend that, I don't think there should be a legal leg to stand on, but there will be those that will think that the idea of the restoration of justice for those barriers being presented is not viable. And I think we should always be assured in our actions and in our mission that they are.
Absolutely, that's a great point, and that's why the work by Pacifica Law Group was important for us to be sure that both the bill in language was right, but also the messaging that we were putting out was not putting us in a place where when those folks question the deservedness of folks,
Mhm.
we're able to come back to a bill that can stand the test of time. So thank you
And-
for,
and- Yeah, and those harmed should receive justice.
absolutely.
Thank you. Goodbye. All.
Well, thank you for staying on. Steve, then Cleve, your reflections.
Yeah, hi, everyone. I would only share that, a lot has already been shared and the commission's just super excited to be part of this this journey to reconcile the harm that is so well documented. And just to emphasize the study that we, again, have already launched the RFP, trying to get as out in front of things as possible as we're chasing some deadlines. But we're going to be incredibly intentional, going step by step. We have to walk a very, very smart and fine line in anticipation of the kinds of legal challenges that we can anticipate, that we know will come. We collectively, and by that I mean everyone on this call and others, are forging a new path that a lot of people are watching. We got a lot of people behind us. But we just have to be really, really smart. And part of that is going to be feeling really slow. We are going to be gathering, the study that we are going to be doing is really an assembling of other studies. Hard to imagine that we have to document the harm that has been done because it is so obvious to those of us that are on this call, especially those folks of color. But we have to walk the line and make the legal case. And so we are going to be very transparent as well. And if I need to be checked on that, you can reach out and please give me a call. But we're just excited to get going and do our part to deliver some outcomes.
Well, we're incredibly grateful for you stepping up as the commission to take on this work, Steve. Cliff?
Yeah, you know what? I often have to, well, to quote one of our great tours here in America, it was all a dream. I just look at everything in front of us right now, and I still can't believe that this passed. I still can't believe, and not because that there isn't overwhelming evidence of the harm that has been done, not because there isn't a massive racial home ownership gap that we see as a result of that, but because we live in the same country in the same time where we are just now holding congressional hearings about even the prospect, the question of studying reparations, let alone, and I know, and I'm not using that word specifically for this piece of legislation, but like any conversation around repairing the harm that has been done to Black and brown people in this country has always been a tough conversation. It has always been a tough conversation. And the fact that we had such a broad coalition pushing this through, right? This wasn't just Black community members. It wasn't just BIPOC led coalition, but this was a coalition of patients, as you said, that included our friends from the real estate community, that included, our friends from throughout the housing community, that quite frankly, even had a number of people who were skeptical yet voted for it and were at least mildly supportive of the idea. So that in and of itself, all of this, still, I'm still in awe of the amazing work, and particularly, you said it, Patience, but I'll say this again: the legwork that Representative Chop, that Representative Jamila Taylor, that Senator Lovick put in. All of Senator Lovick's speeches, I feel like, should have really been recorded, because I feel like they were, but I would definitely love to listen to them and again. They were just really masterful and captured the oeuvre of the best of our storytelling tradition in the Americas, and with the like kind of skilled craftsmanship of a senior legislator. So I was, I was all in shock. But one thing I will say, just to kind of sum it all up, is we don't just have a legal challenge ahead of us, which I am certain that will happen, but to kind of answer Marty's question in the chat, we do have an implementation challenge ahead of us that will set the groundwork, I'm sure, of being able to expand this bill later. And with that legal challenge, and I should say with the implementation opportunity, rather, I think we can set an example for other states of how this legislation can function, how we can go further. So yeah, that's kind of all I have to say right now. So thank you.
Thank you, Cliff. And you're absolutely right on the implementation front. It's both an opportunity and a challenge, which is why we'll have the oversight committee in place. But we also already have some of our BHI network partners out there at national conferences being asked questions about how this all came together. So Daryl is at a conference in the next week or so sharing about some of the work that was done. With that, Denise, would love to hear from you. I don't see Anna Boone on the call. I believe she may have had to jump. Michael Dodson. So Denise, let's start off with you.
Sure. What do you want me to speak about?
Just your reflection, having
Okay.
worked and being part of the strategy group, and what this bill being passed means to you, and what are some promising practices we're learning for the network here.
Great. I love to talk about that. I mean, I think like a lot of other people have mentioned, the coalition around this bill was just really powerful, and bringing in partners that aren't normally on the same side of the table when we're talking about our homeownership agenda. I thought it was really great to see people really unifying, and just frankly looking forward to all the additional great work we're going to do with this, large varied coalition in the future. So there's that part as well, not just the victory on this bill, but future bills. I'm really excited for implementation. I am a person who enjoys the implementation part of things. I like to see things happening, and I think pretty excited to be part of whatever that looks like. I also would say, I had an opportunity to go to a couple conferences in Washington, D.C. about a month back, and having the chance to talk about this bill and the program and the coalition with folks from other states. There's a lot of excitement in other states to just see what's happening here. And I feel, really proud to be a Washingtonian, to be, on the leading edge in this, and kind of hoping to see other states follow suit. And then I think just the last thing for me is, the struggle for racial justice has been a very long one. And I know there are people who are part of this coalition who have, dedicated their lives to that. And I think it often can be one that has, sort of that long arc. And it is just really energizing to see something so promising, and something that can bear fruit, and something that, is sort of, it's actually happening. And I'm personally taking a lot of energy from that, for what other work lies ahead in helping to bring more racial justice to home ownership, and having more people access home ownership and benefit from all of what we all know it brings, and not just for people and families, but communities. So I'm personally feeling really energized by this, and looking forward to all additional good work with everybody.
Profoundly said, Dennis. Thank you. Michael, you're up next.
Thank you. I echo a lot of what Denise has mentioned. But I also would like to just say that this, I personally, I knew this was going to be an uphill battle. And I was not quite sure how we were going to get it over the hump, but one thing that was key to me and kind of gave me a lot of the confidence was not only the number of individuals who are around the table that are involved in housing, but I truly think the fact that the Housing Finance Commission and Steve was involved in this, and they were kind of the focal point for this, the critical credit program here. I know I'm stumbling on that, but special credit program. I think that really caught the ear of a lot of lenders. I'm more excited about the aftermath and what's going to come. The commission is a key contact for a lot of financial institutions in the area. It's a strategic organization for a lot of us to help meet our CRA lending goals in our low and moderate income communities, and a lot of which are BIPOC communities as well. So I'm really excited for the aftermath here, and I look forward to continuing staying engaged in this. I think this is going to provide opportunity for more conversation for financial institutions as well, knowing that we were part of the problem. Now we can really increase our engagement on the solution side. So that's something I'm really excited about. I know that I'm also looking forward to deepening and other financial institutions as well, deepening the partners with their nonprofit organizations, the home sites, the habitats of the world that are on the ground and closely connected in a lot of these communities. So I think there's going to be more of a groundswell of support for those organizations by lenders in the community as well. So again, the heavy lift has already occurred, but now I'm more excited about the implementation process as well, and quite frankly, looking for, now that we've crossed this line, the next goal is how do we get lenders more engaged in a much more prominent fashion going forward. So I'm looking forward to those conversations.
Absolutely. Thank you, Michael. And having the diversity of support that we had on this bill truly made the difference. Having financial institutions show up to testify and support made a sway to get the bill out of the Senate committee in significant ways than we can imagine. And having said that, I do know, Sean Scott, you're on the call, you testified a number of times. I would love to hear some of your reflections. Allison at MBOX, you did extensive work, including the bill in your communications and helping get the pro sign-ins to extensive numbers. Would love to hear your voice as well. And we'll open it up in the floor for others who are on the call just for your reflections. So Sean?
Yeah, absolutely. Patience, thanks so much. I think that we were really able to accomplish as much as we were able to this session on this bill and others as a result of the leadership that you brought to the table and keeping us organized, keeping us really focused on you and Bambi as well, and just making sure we're able to move a really important bill forward. Those of you who are sort of familiar with work that I've done over the years might know that I worked once upon a time, I'm not going to say exactly how long ago, as an undergrad at the University of Washington with the Civil Rights and Labor History Project, where we, sort of worked to track a lot of these covenants that marred our history in Washington and in Seattle in specific, unfortunately. And as it is the case, I think with many historians, you just sort of assume that the research that you were doing was going to be academically very interesting. Maybe, you know, somebody at the history conference at a fondue plate or whatever was going to find it somewhat interesting. And that it would become, you know, pretty obscure and become the stuff of footnotes. So I can't really begin to talk about how gratifying it is to actually see, you know, work that all of us as researchers put in, you know, 20 years ago, close to 20 years ago, and knowing that that is actually having an impact and improving the material conditions of people throughout our state, throughout our city, and knowing, you know, seeing how surreal it was to see Professor Gregory and Professor Quintard Taylor, who I had taken classes from in, you know, way back in the Bush administration, right? Like actually seeing them testifying, speaking to a lot of the points that I had first sort of heard them speak to in undergraduate classes all those years ago. So I think we were talking earlier about sort of the moral arc being one that I think is an extended one. I think that it's just another way of sort of illustrating the idea that politics is kind of an endurance sport, and those of us who stick around, those of us who are able to sort of stomach a little bit of heartbreak in the short term, and using that as a setup for bigger wins later on down the road, I think ultimately, I think that's how progress wins out. So just really proud to be part of this coalition and part of this effort with everybody who's here, and so great, so grateful to be able to hear everybody else's reflections on this bill and on this session as well. So thanks a lot.
Well, thank you, Sean. And we saw truly how much the bill benefited from the research work that you did with Professor Gregory and others in really providing the data that was necessary to get us off the ground. So thank you. Allison?
Well, thank you, Patience, and thank you, everyone. I've just really appreciated listening to the conversation today. You know, I'm here, you know, really on behalf of the Coalition for More Housing Choices, and just I'm reminded of the value of coalitions. You know, I think of this BHI network, and it's a growing network too. But you know, just excited to see what can be accomplished. You know, by coming together and doing this work together as partners, as coalitions. And I know I know several have touched on the testimony that happened on the Covenant Home Ownership Account Bill in the House and Senate. And I know for our newsletter that week, I made sure to include links out on the legislative website back to those hearings. So if anyone had missed it, I thought it was so compelling just to be able to link directly to where it starts in those hearings, and you can still go back and visit it and watch that again. But then also interesting to hear. I'll be interested to see how it all interacts with the combination of bills that pass, including the middle housing bill. You know, really excited to see just how this all works together in tandem over time. Just really exciting. Year for housing, and look forward to the work ahead. I mean, it's I think right now the focus is going to be on implementation. I guess we've heard it here today, but then all these pieces working together, implementation going forward. And Patience, you mentioned the comprehensive plans, the role they play in a lot of this work. So exciting progress that has been made, and this is a great moment. But keep an eye on the ball on that implementation piece going forward will also be so important. But again, I just value the work of coalitions here and of the broader BHI network. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And we will let that be the wrap on the remarks. I know we have one more agenda items. I do want to close by saying that when we started this work, we knew that coming together would be where the impact would be. And we've demonstrated that with this bill. We have so much strategy to leverage as a foundation, and we'll be thinking of the next steps of not only implementation, but what else can we move forward as legislation to continue to make an impact? Because I can tell you it's long-standing impact that can't be changed by just one revenue tool. It's going to take so many tools being in place. And once again, many thanks to all of you for leaning in and driving this work. With that said, we have a June home ownership forum that is coming up. And Denise, I know you have been waiting for the longest time, so I will hand over to you to close us off if you're still on the call. Otherwise, Bambi, I may tap you to give the update if Dennis has jumped off. And looks like she's here. Over to you.
I'm here. I have just been soaking in all of the positivity that is coming from talking about the CHA bill. So thanks very much for giving WHRC some time on the agenda to make sure everyone here knows about the June event. So I believe the official title after all this time is the Statewide Affordable Home Ownership Forum. So it is a statewide event. We gather together all folks who work in different parts of the home ownership space. So whether they're focused more on development or home buyer counseling, financing, housing authorities, you know, any kind of different type of, you know, stakeholder in that work. And then we get together and we have a day of programming. The morning program is focused on policy. So we will be reviewing sort of how home ownership did in the legislative session. And really with a focus on that, a lot of the bills that advance homeownership opportunity at the state level this year are actually things that created opportunity at the local level, and now there'll need to be advocacy at the local level to see those things get implemented, you know, the way we would all like them to be. So we're going to talk a little bit about how local advocacy comes from this and where we go for that. We will have a engaging lunch speaker, TBD. And then in the afternoon, we usually shift the programming, you know, morning time, we're kind of focused more on policy, and then in the afternoon, we're focused more on programmatic. We are looking for ideas for sessions. So if there is something really innovative and effective happening in your community and you would like to see it replicated and think it has potential, we, you know, want to hear about it. So we're putting some things together right now. I have a committee that is helping to collaborate on all of this, and a few folks here in the call today, or you know, on this Zoom, are in that committee. So that's really helpful as well. So June 15th, which is a Thursday, and the meeting.
Thank you, Denise. And we are right at time.
Oh, I was just going to say Tukwila Community Center is where it'll be held. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to WHRC and we'll be happy to answer them, or if you have ideas. Thanks.
Well, thank you. We are right at time. And I know we had some really nice slide decks that we could have walked you through to remind you of the work that we have to get to increasing the access to intergenerational wealth building amongst the Black communities. But let me leave you with this number: 42% of Black households in Washington state have zero net worth. And it means that the work that we're doing now, while it's making a dent, is really up against the tides of long-standing inequities. So I hope you spend time soaking in the success, but get energized for the work ahead of us. We will be reconvening and planning on what the next big challenge that we will collectively tackle will look like. And we're looking to you to show up as you have shown up the past year, to truly co-create effective solutions that we're seeing come across the finish line. You are the leadership we've been waiting for, and this is the moment in time to make change real. And thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.